You are listening to the Beautifully Enough podcast with Valerie Reynolds, episode 23. Hey there, sweet friend. Or maybe you're a new friend. If so, welcome to the Beautifully Enough podcast. Are you finding yourself living in the ordinary? Or is your mind full of nothing but negative self-talk? Trust me, I have been there, sister. I know what it's like to feel unqualified, unworthy, and not confident. You constantly feel like there is a more powerful version of yourself living inside of you, but you just can't seem to get past those mental obstacles that are holding you back. I want to help you dive deeper into the truths in your life, the real truths God speaks over who you are as a woman, wife, mom, sister, friend, CEO, or a stay-at-home mom like me. Now is your time to break those chains and start exploring that hidden potential of your confidence and your beauty, both inside and out. This is Valerie Reynolds, your new confidence coach, and this is the Beautifully Enough podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to the Beautifully Enough podcast. This episode, I struggled with titling it. I really did. I have a few different titles for it, and I finally settled on, obviously, when you clicked this episode, it's God Doesn't Work in Your Comfort Zone. So that's what I titled it, God Doesn't Work in Your Comfort Zone. We're going to jump right into it because, honestly, when I was typing up my notes and doing a little bit of research and trying to figure out what best fits, what Bible story, what verse best fits what I'm going to talk about, it kind of got a little lengthy. I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to try to cut out all of the little extra stuff at the very beginning. We're just going to jump right into it, guys. We're just going to rip off the Band-Aid and just go for it, okay? So the title of today's episode of the Beautifully Enough podcast is called God Doesn't Work in Your Comfort Zone. And some of my original titles for this was Don't Use God as an Excuse. God is not your scapegoat. I felt like those were a little bit more on the harsher side, but I finally settled on God Doesn't Work in Your Comfort Zone. And here's why. Okay, here's the background. Here's the inspiration for where this all came from. So last week, I was telling you that my inspiration literally came a couple of hours before I typed up and recorded the podcast because it came to me in our online church service. This topic actually was an inspiration from a few days ago. Okay, so I was talking to a friend and she had heard somebody say, I prayed about it, but blank. Okay, and I left it blank for you to fill in the blank. Okay, have you ever said that before? Have you ever heard somebody say it before? I've prayed about it, but... And then you proceed to fill in the blank with something that they're not going to pursue, something they're not going to join, something they're not going to work for, something they just decided, I prayed about it and I just decided that it's not a good fit for me, right? Now, don't come after me, okay? Don't come after me. Prayer is so important in your walk with God and growing your spiritual faith. It's how you communicate with Him. Those one-on-one conversations bring you closer to Him. That quietness allows you to really hear God's voice inside of your heart, and you can listen to Him. And I encourage you to pray about any situation, right? Big or small. Like just go back to, what was it? Maybe two episodes ago, episode 21. I talked about giving everything to God, big or small, give everything to Him. So I obviously pray. I'm not saying prayer's bad. What I'm talking about is, have you ever prayed something? Maybe you're praying about something, a decision, something that maybe makes you a little uncomfortable, maybe something you're hesitating to do. Maybe you're not quite sure where to go with it, the prompting, and it's pushing you out of your comfort zone. You're not sure if you need to say yes to that journey or no to that journey because you're not sure about the timing, and it just makes you a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe there's some fear. Maybe there's some fear surrounding it. Maybe there's some uncertainty surrounding it. Maybe you don't have all the right answers. Okay, you kind of picking up what I'm putting down there. Okay, so have you ever prayed about something and it makes you uncomfortable? We're talking about comfort zones. And instead of listening to God and His answer for you, you instead choose to listen more to your own decision. You decide ahead of time that you are going to make the decision, but to cover it up, you're going to use the excuse, I prayed about it. Does that make sense? Like deep down, this topic is eating away inside of you, and you know that maybe you should actually do it, and you just can't seem to get it out of your head. Like God opened the door for you, and he keeps reminding you left and right with obvious hints that you need to do it and with subtle hints that you need to do it, and he's giving you all of these different signs. But regardless on what he's giving you, because that decision or that yes could potentially put you out of your comfort zone, you decide instead to go with your comfort zone. You say, no, I prayed about it, but I'm not going to do it. And it's not really that God didn't tell you to do it. It's that you are choosing for yourself, and you're using I prayed about it, or you're using God as an excuse. Have you ever used I prayed about it as an excuse to cover up how you really feel about that calling that maybe takes you past your comfort zone? So instead, you're just going to forget about it. And you're going to say, I prayed about it. But actually, I prayed about it means I don't know how to do this. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the qualifications. So instead of learning, instead of walking into it knowing that God's going to qualify you, you instead just use the excuse, no, I prayed about it and it's not a right fit. Maybe you've used that phrase, and I prayed about it actually means I'm afraid I'm going to be judged. No, I don't really know how to do that, and I don't want to take time to learn. No, this goes beyond my comfort zone. I'd rather just stay inside my little comfort zone box. But instead of owning up to all of that, or instead of facing that fear, facing that hesitation, or facing that uncomfortable situation, you just ignore it. I hope I'm being clear with what I'm trying to say. Okay, because God does answer your prayers. He does. You pray and he may give you a yes. He may give you a no. No, not right now. No to that certain prayer. And he may tell you yes to other prayers. Yes, this is your journey. Yes, you need to do this. So once again, I'm not saying that you need to not pray. Pray about all things. Pray about everything. Ask for God's vision on everything. What I wanted to do was shine a light on your heart. Have you ever used God's will? Have you ever used God's answer, air quotes, as an excuse to not step out of your comfort zone? Because you never really wanted to listen for his answer. You just made up your own, calling it God's answer, saying, I prayed about it. This is what we're going to talk about. God's true revelation about your next step may actually push you outside of your comfort zone. It may push your skill set. It may push your qualifications. It may push your knowledge. It might be full of unanswered questions. It may be full of uncertainty. You may not know all of the steps, but he's not telling you you need to know all the steps. He's telling you you need to just take the first one. And are you listening to him, or are you ignoring his calling? Is your heart for God, or is your heart for your comfort? So what we are gonna do, we're going to talk about Ruth. I was thinking about, let's talk about Joshua. Let's talk about Moses. Let's talk about Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I was thinking about all of these men who were put into some particularly uncomfortable situations. Like, I don't want to be in a den full of lions. I don't want to be thrown in a furnace. But instead, I wanted to talk about a woman. Let's talk about Ruth. And I actually had to go and brush up on my story of Ruth. I know the story of Ruth, but before I typed this up, I sat and read from start to finish. It's only 4 chapters, guys. Start to finish the entire story of Ruth. So I'm going to summarize it for you. We're actually going to go over the entire book of Ruth right now, but I'm not going to read it all to you. I'm going to give you a little summary, and then I'm going to point out the verses that really spoke to me and how we are going to take the story of Ruth and we're going to see how the story of Ruth pertains to our life when it comes to our calling, when it comes to stepping out of our comfort zone, when it comes to understanding that sometimes God's calling on our heart or on our life may not fit within our timeline. It may come with some hesitation. It may come with some fear. And what I want to clarify for you guys is that fear and that hesitation, those are human emotions. Those are natural, but those don't necessarily mean that God's telling you no. And I feel like a lot of times we expect God to give us this clear path with no obstacles, and your heart's going to be at peace and you're going to have all of the answers. And when that happens, then God said yes. But that's not always the case. Sometimes God says yes, and we are still a little scared. Sometimes God says yes, and we don't have all the answers. Sometimes God says yes, and He has to qualify us. He has to teach us. Sometimes God says yes, and other people are doing it too, but He's telling you need to do it also. So that's what I want to hit at. Sometimes God's yeses are still full of these, what we feel like are negative emotions, and those negative emotions, we feel like those are no's. We feel like those are equivalents to no's, and they're not. Okay, so let's go over the story of Ruth. So here's kind of a background. So Ruth was the daughter of Naomi. Okay, starting in chapter 1 of the book of Ruth. Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi. And Naomi's husband, he passed away, and then her 2 sons passed away. Ruth was married to one son, and the other son was married to a woman named Oprah. Okay, totally threw me off. I hear Oprah, and I'm thinking, you get a car, and you get a car. Not that Oprah, okay, another Oprah. So you have these 2 daughter-in-laws, and then you have Naomi, and all of their husbands had passed away. So they're all left alone. And Naomi, she is a Jew, and she was traveling back to Bethlehem. But Oprah and Ruth, they actually were Moabite women. So they were pagans. They celebrated and worshiped different gods. They didn't celebrate and worship the God. They had a totally different culture. They had different gods. They were not from Bethlehem. They were not Jewish, okay? And so Naomi told her daughter-in-laws during this travel that they could go back home. Okay, they could return back home. They could go back to their families, go back to their comfort zones, essentially. And Oprah returned, but Ruth stayed. And so that's where I'm going to pick up the story. Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 through 22. This is the NIV translation. But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Remember, she was not Jewish. "Where you die, I will die, and where I will be buried, may the Lord deal with me, and it ever so severely, even if death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman explained, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, and the Lord brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth, the daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. So I'm going to stop right there. Okay, that's essentially the summary of chapter 1 in Ruth. And what I found interesting reading through this chapter, the very last 4 words in this chapter said, "as the barley harvest was beginning." I lied, that was 6 words, not 4. As the barley harvest was beginning. And to me, remember, we're talking about comfort zones. We're talking about going on the calling or the purpose, following the purpose that God has for us. When you go on journeys, or when you maybe take a chance on something, or you have a calling, we can use the term harvest. To me, harvest symbolizes the end result. Right? You go on a journey and you want to harvest whatever you're supposed to be harvesting. That's the end result. But this didn't say that the harvest was happening. It said the harvest was beginning. So it hadn't shown up yet. And how many of us, this is what I want you to contemplate, how many of us, including myself, don't take that one step forward because we can't see the other 20 steps in the end result? See, here Ruth chose to not go back to her comfort zone. She didn't choose her comfort zone. She didn't choose to go back home. She chose to follow Naomi. She chose to pick up their ways, their culture, their God, and follow over there versus going back home. She didn't want to go back to her comfort zone. She followed Naomi into this place she had never been before. She knew nothing about it. She can't see the ending. She has no idea if she's ever going to get married again. Is she going to be a widow the rest of her life? Who's going to take care of them? How will this turn out? She doesn't know. She doesn't know any of those answers. How many times have you not known the answer, the end result, and because of that, you didn't even take the first step? See, Ruth did take the first step. She did not know the harvest. She did not know the 20 steps in between. She didn't know what the end result was going to be, but she took the first step forward anyways. Would you have taken that first step if you had no answers to how the future would look? Are you the type of person that needs to know all of the steps, know all of the answers, know the end result before you ever take the first one? Do you like to stay inside your comfort zone? Okay, so we're going to keep going. Chapter 2 of Ruth. I'm picking up on verse 2, okay? So chapter 2, verse 2. And Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turns out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz. Quick little summary. She ends up working hard. He notices her. And then in verse 10, they pick up and it said, "At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, 'Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?'" She had shown up, she worked hard, and he happened to see that. And so in verse 11, Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And so here's what stuck out to me in chapter 2. Ruth was a hard worker. She didn't necessarily have the skills or the expertise. If you notice in verse, 3? In verse 3, it says she had to follow behind the harvesters. And I felt like that was so important. That can be overlooked so easily. But what it symbolized to me was that she had to work for her favor. She had to go behind other people. She did not come in first place. She was not the best of the best. She was not the most skilled. So that begs the question, have you been avoiding a calling from God because you don't feel qualified? Or is it going to be too much work and you're scared of the hard work? Or maybe you don't have all the knowledge. So instead of learning or developing your skills and developing the knowledge, you'd rather ignore it and ignore God's calling, basically take it as a no when you're just picking the no, instead of learning, taking that opportunity to learn. See, walking in God's calling doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be the expert. God qualifies the called, does he not? So once again, going back to our topic of comfort zones, are you allowing your comfort zone or your lack of knowledge? Your lack of knowledge is within your comfort zone. Are you allowing that to keep you from pursuing a purpose? Okay, let's keep going. Chapter 3 and 4, we kind of finish up the story of Ruth. I'm going to pick up in Ruth chapter 3, verse 3. So this is where Naomi, remember the mother-in-law, she tells Ruth this, starting in verse 3. "Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." "I will do everything you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. And then in chapter 4, Boaz ends up marrying Ruth. You can read all about chapter 4. They have a son. His name is Obed. And then at the end of chapter 4, they go over through this long lineage. And basically, Obed is the father of Jesse, who is the father of David, King David, which eventually leads through the lineage to Jesus. So here we are, we have Ruth. She's not even a Jew, yet she is part of the bloodline to Jesus. So that is normally what the story of Ruth is told for, okay? But what I want to talk about is chapter 3, verse 3. That's where I want to go back to, where Naomi tells Ruth to put on her best clothes, put on perfume, wash up, clean yourself up, get dressed, offer your best. And what did Ruth reply? "I will do whatever you say." So I'm not going to focus on Boaz marrying Ruth. I'm not going to focus on the lineage to Jesus. I want to focus on the fact she just said, "I will do whatever you say. I will offer my best." What's our answer when we're prompted to pursue something? Do we answer with our absolute best? "I will do whatever you say and I will do it to the absolute best that I can"? Is that how you reply? Or is your default response listing all of the reasons why it's not your turn? I don't know enough. Somebody else is already doing it. Somebody knows more than me. Somebody's prettier than me. Somebody's more confident than me. Somebody's more skilled than me. Somebody's more successful than me. Somebody makes more money than me. They're smarter than me. They know how to do it, but I can't. Sister, your best is the best for God. Ruth didn't have a lot of money. She didn't have a lot to give. But when she was told to present her absolute best, her answer was, I will do whatever you say. She gave her best. You give your best. Your best is the best for God. He made you. He qualified you. Give him your best and not your excuses. Give God your best and not your excuses. God might be calling you to something today. What is it? I don't know what it is. I can speculate on a whole bunch of different things. It could be something huge. It could be something small. But he's calling you to do something. He might have an opportunity right in front of you, calling your name. And you hear it. You know it's there. And you're going to pray about it. God, validate this prompting that's inside of me. Is it from you? Is it something I need to pursue? Yes or no? And I encourage you to be aware of God's voice. Listen for his true voice and not what you are wanting to hear. Because you might expect his yes to feel like peace. You might expect his yes to feel fearless. You might expect his yes to be that you are flooded full of knowledge and you know all about it. You may expect his yes to fit right inside your comfort zone. But God doesn't operate in our comfort zones. Don't confuse a little bit of fear, a little bit of uncertainty. You're going to feel some loss of control because you may not have all of the knowledge or the skills. I know that's me. I'm a control freak. When I don't know about everything, when I don't have all of the information, I don't feel like I'm in control of that situation. But just because I may not feel like I'm in 100% control of the situation, that doesn't mean God's not in control of it. That doesn't mean it's a no from God. Don't confuse that little bit of fear, that little bit of uncertainty as a no from God. Think back to Ruth. Don't you think that maybe she was a little bit fearful that she was going to a place she'd never been before? Like, that's not her people. That's not her mom. That's not her dad. That's not where she grew up. That's not her comfort zone. She basically chose a totally different life. Don't you think that came with a little bit of fear? She probably didn't feel like she had a whole lot of control. She probably knew nothing about where they were headed. Nothing about the culture, or maybe very little about the culture. She was human just like us. Don't you think that maybe she had those feelings too? Of walking outside of her comfort zone, and it kind of brings a pit to your stomach, that deep, nauseating, anxious, stressed, maybe a little bit of fear, this oh crap, what did I just do feeling? Those feelings, those emotions don't necessarily signify a no from God. Sometimes they could be evidence of his yes. What's not being written in your story today because you're expecting God's yeses to be fearless, to be within your comfort zone, to be within your realm of knowledge? I want you to sit down and I want you to clear out your mind. Clear out all the answers that you want and make room for God's answers, even if it pushes you out of your comfort zone. He knows the way. He's gone before you. You may not see the end result, and you may not even see the 20 steps in between. All he wants you to do is take one step. How can you have hope? How can you have faith if you know the answer? Seriously, how could you possess faith if he gave you the end result? Would you need faith? I wouldn't need faith. I wouldn't need hope because I would already know the end result. I wouldn't need to put faith in anything because I knew the answer. That's what faith and hope is all about. We need to put our faith and our trust in him, even if we don't know the end result, because he's gone before us. He has us. He works everything together for our good. God does not work in your comfort zone. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for this word today. I know that even I had uncertainty with this word. I wasn't quite sure where to go with it. I wasn't quite sure what was going to be said, but I know it was something that needed to be talked about. I know it came from you, Lord, and I hope that my words resonated with whoever needed to hear this today. There is someone out there, this word was for them. And so I ask that you clear their hearts, that you open up the eyes of their heart to receive this word, and that you work within them, that you validate the feelings that they've been having, that you show up to them, remind them, reassure them, I know the way. I know the way. You don't have to. You just take the first step because I've already cleared out the next 20. They're open for you, ready to go, but you got to take that first one, daughter. I ask, Lord, that you give us your strength. Remind us daily that you are with us on these journeys, and that even though we don't know all of the answers, we know that you do. And because we have faith and we have hope, that's enough. Help us operate in our faith, Lord, in our faith in you. Our faith comes from knowing that you know the end. You've gone before us. You already know our story. Help us have faith in your story for us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. You guys, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Beautifully Enough podcast. I will catch you guys next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Beautifully Enough podcast. Your support means the absolute world to me. Please do me a huge favor and leave me a quick review. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you are one of the first to get the newest episode every week. Find me on Instagram at Val_Reynolds. Take a screenshot of the episode you are loving and tag me in your Instagram stories. I would love to connect with you more on social media. Catch you guys next week. Bye.